What can you say? Larken Rose. The man puts his hiney where his values are, sometimes if that means a jail cell. He is the author of The Iron Web, Kicking the Dragon, How to Be a Successful Tyrant, which is one of the best manuals on how to run a successful S&M dungeon that you're ever going to see. Highly recommended. And The Most Dangerous Superstition. He is an adherent of the 861 argument, and he was sentenced to 15 months in prison for willful failure to file income tax returns in 5 years, in which the government alleged he earned approximately $500,000 in income, mostly from his S&M dungeon. He was released from prison in December 2006. He is a promoter of the concept of self-ownership and a voluntary society through writing articles, giving talks, making videos. Larken Rose, if there was ever a non-aptly named activist, it would be Larken Rose. A rose is a gentle flower, it smells sweet. But Larken Rose is a rose by any other name. He will certainly kick your ass if you're into tyranny. Ladies and gentlemen, Larken Rose!
Greetings, Libertopia. I drove my family 6,000 miles to get here. Not because San Diego is actually 6,000 miles from Pennsylvania, but because real men don't ask for directions. No, we took the scenic tour. We used it as an excuse to go to lots of fun places. But it's fun to be here at Libertopia, and the name of the event immediately brought to mind how so many people ask, well, or they say, oh, the idea of a stateless society, society without government, that's so utopian, that'll never happen. And that can't possibly, it would never work and it'll never happen, so give it up, it's just, you know, you're chasing a utopian dream. And at times it can feel like that because, you know, we've all experienced the uphill battle of trying to get people to question the ideas that they've been indoctrinated into their whole lives. And in the vast majority of cases, they don't want to budge, at least for a long time. They want to say, no, what I think is already just fine. It makes perfect sense. It's perfectly moral. Leave me alone. I don't want to hear this anymore. And so it can feel like, yeah, you know, we have a little victory here and there, and now we have this cool event. We're still the tiniest percentage of the population that actually wants a mutually voluntary society. However, when people ask me, what are the chances that there will ever be a society without government, I say 100%. It is an absolute certainty. Now, when it will happen is anybody's guess. With all the mental inertia, as I call it, it may be a long time, and I expect that lots of very nasty things are going to happen in the meantime in the name of the state. Let me give an analogy of why I say it's completely inevitable that we will get a stateless society. A few hundred years ago, it was completely inevitable that eventually everybody was going to know that the Earth is spherical, more or less, and goes around the sun. Even though the powers that be were going to great lengths to demonize and torture and cage and sometimes kill anybody who said that. And at the time, the few people who actually looked up at the sky and made charts of where things were going, it may have felt very frustrating to them that they had all this evidence and they could show it to people and people would go, but the authorities say it's swell. The authorities say. So to them, they may have wondered if, you know, will we ever get to a time where the people actually know that the world is round and it goes around the sun? We were absolutely destined to get to a point where everybody knows that because the evidence will always be there. Sooner or later, the lie will die. And when it does, it's never coming back. Never again is mankind going to think that the Earth is flat and the sun goes around us and that giant lie. That lie held on for a very long time because of the authorities, but it couldn't go on forever. Government is a lie, and it is a provable lie. It is a myth. It is a superstition. Now, to give a little background, most of the anarchists I know got to be anarchists by deciding that between the choice of a society with a government and a society without a government, the one without would work better. I did not become an anarchist by deciding that. In fact, I never came to that conclusion, that this would work better. Instead, I got there by realizing that entire debate is exactly as useful and rational as the debate over whether Christmas will work better with Santa Claus or without him. When you realize there isn't a choice, the question becomes silly. I became an anarchist not when I decided that choice B was better than choice A, but when I realized there isn't another choice. Anarchy is what is. Government is what is hallucinated. And that may sound strange to people who don't know why I say such things. Obviously, the tanks are very real, and the guns are very real, and the jackboots that wield them are very real. Politicians are real, the buildings are real. The authority is not. And without that, nobody would call it government. The term government implies legitimacy. It implies they have the right to do what they do. And if people, it's the reason people don't look at the Bloods and the Crips and call them government. Because we all recognize, well, they do it by force, they're thugs, and oh well. The reason people call what the thugs and crooks in DC do government is because they still hallucinate the existence of a right to rule. And it is logically provable that that is a lie. The notion that there can be a legitimate ruling class, whether it's constitutional or communist or whatever it is, the notion there can be one at all is a lie, and that's very provable. Now, I'll give sort of a very short version of a couple of the proofs of that. For a more thorough version, get a copy of The Most Dangerous Superstition. Simple proof number one. Can you delegate a right you don't have? No. If you don't have the right to rob your neighbor, you don't have the right to hire somebody else to rob your neighbor. It's self-evident, it's obvious, everybody recognizes that. Well, if two of you want to hire someone to rob your neighbor, does it become right? No. And you know, this crowd, you all know this, but since this might go on YouTube, this is for the world that hasn't thought about that, which is almost everybody else. And if you can't delegate a right you don't have, even if there's a few of you, the people who call themselves Congress can't have a right that I don't have and that you don't have. If I can't impose a tax, they can't impose a tax. If I can't regulate something, they can't regulate something. It's painfully simple, but a drastic departure from the way people have been taught to think. So much so that the cognitive dissonance kicks in and people try to come up with convoluted excuses why, well, somehow we made it so the people in Congress do have superhuman rights. But it's loony. They don't. They're people. They're not even nice people. They're not even good people. They're not even average people. They're mostly liars and crooks. But people still hallucinate that they have the right to rule. But that is a lie. And when the lie falls, it's never coming back. Which is why I say it's completely unavoidable that statism will fall and there will be a stateless society in the same way there will be a Santa Claus-free society. It's what already is. We just need people to recognize what already is. One other quick, short version of a proof that there cannot be authority and there cannot be government is an individual cannot have a moral obligation to do what he deems is wrong. In other words, it can't be good to be bad. Now that's pretty darn simple, and most people would agree, yeah, it's not good to be bad. If it's not good to be bad, there can't be government. For the very simple reason that if I think I should do A and government commands me to do B, I cannot have a moral obligation to do B. And that means all the legitimacy of their legal system, all their claimed authority goes poof. Because suddenly I should disobey them. And if I should disobey them, they don't have authority. And there's a few other ways to prove it. But basically, government is provably a myth. It isn't a choice between do we organize in this way or do we organize in that way. It's do we hallucinate something that's not there or do we accept reality as what it is. No matter how many of us say demonize and throw into cages or kill or whatever extent the control freaks go to, the simple proof that government is a lie will always be there. So that truth will, sooner or later, outlast the lie. And just like the lie of the shape of the earth and how the sun and the earth and all that works, just as that failed and will never come back, the lie of government will fail and it will never come back. In light of that, I'd like to sort of pass on a message to a few different groups of people. The first would be law enforcers. The people who are out there violently imposing the will of politicians because they really and truly believe the politicians have the right to rule us, and they really and truly believe that disobedience is a sin. To those people, I would say this: there is going to come a day when humanity looks back at right now the way we look back at Nazi Germany. And we look back at the enforcers of Nazi Germany and we think, you irresponsible, stupid, evil boneheads, how could you do that? Now at the time, they were the righteous law enforcers. They were making law and order. I'm sure that it was, in their minds, perfectly justified. That was the right thing to do. If they could have been given a sneak peek into the future of what the rest of the world will think of them until the end of time, maybe they would have reconsidered and said, okay, maybe doing what we're told isn't a great idea. My message to law enforcers today is, that's you. Whether it's in 2 years or 10 or 50 or 100, the whole world is going to look back at you right now and say, yes, there were some people who would go violently break into someone's house and drag them away and put them in a cage for years because they had a plan. There were people who would violently barge into people's houses and put them into cages because they didn't hand over protection racket money to a gang of control freaks. Right now, most of the world thinks that's perfectly fine. They won't think that forever. To those of you in law enforcement, if you want history to remember you as a hero, quit. Those who know the story of the White Rose, the group in Nazi Germany that spoke out against Hitler and his regime and were eventually decapitated, we now look back at them and go, way to be brave, way to do the right thing, and we look back at the people who punished them and hurt them as stupid, evil, mindless, nasty people. They were criminals. The White Rose was a bunch of criminals because the law said you don't criticize the regime. They were also the good guys. And if you look in history over and over and over again, you will see that the law-abiding taxpayers were the enablers of evil, and the criminals were the ones pushing humanity forward. So those of you in law enforcement, you might want to keep that in mind, that you will not be remembered as great, brave heroes. You will be remembered as what you are, unthinking thugs. Now, to those of us out here causing trouble and spreading ideas that people don't want to hear about, like, maybe we should interact non-violently, the message for you, I'll steal a little bit from things Stefan said at Porkfest, which I thought was awesome. I may have been the only sober person in the room hearing it at the time. But future generations will look back at those of us who dared to say what was true but completely unpopular, and say, thanks. Thank you for starting to push humanity in the right direction against the tide. And like Stefan's opening remarks, don't wait for the tide, be the tide. Push it forward yourself. And if you're waiting around for someone else to do it first, they're not going to. Everybody's waiting around for someone else to do it first. Push it when it's uncomfortable and unpopular. And future generations will look back at us and say, well, I'm glad somebody back then was pushing in the right direction while the rest of the compliant, unthinking people were going along with evil. And that leads me to the last group that I want to send a message to. Again, statism is going to fall. We are going to have a stateless society. There's going to be a time when everybody recognizes as painfully obvious, as completely self-evident, that no human being can have the right to rule another human being. That no amount of rituals and documents and pseudo-religious garbage can bestow upon any group the right to forcibly aggress against another. Doesn't matter if you call it constitutions or elections or appointments or divine right of kings. Whatever you call it, it's bogus, start to finish. And there will come a time when not only everybody realizes that, but everybody has trouble imagining people believing otherwise. And my wife and I are lucky enough to get a brief little glimpse of that from our daughter, who was never raised to believe in authority. And I think she seriously has trouble imagining why anybody would. Why would anybody imagine that some gang over there has the right to steal a chunk of whatever you earn? It's insane. And when you escape the lie, you see how insane it is. The people inside the lie, and I was inside the lie most of my life and zealously advocated it and believed it. So I'm not pretending that I started out with any clue what the truth was. But the people still in the lie don't see it as a lie. But my message to them is, you're going to. Because I can point out to you thousands of people, I'm only one of them, who have gone from statist indoctrination to actual humanity. I don't know anyone who went back. It's a one-way street, and it may be very slow to get a majority there, or to get everybody there, but it's a one-way street. It only goes towards enlightened understanding of reality. It only goes away from the lie. Now, the group may be small and it may grow very slowly, but there is no amount of violence that will stop it. Even if, look up for bombers, even if something were to fall out of the sky and blow this place to smithereens and kill us all, it would come up again, because humanity is that way. The struggle for freedom and actual civilization, it keeps showing up throughout history. It shows up as criminals and malcontents who don't want to go with the flow and don't want to play by the rules. And thank goodness for them. But my message to the rest of the world, not the law enforcers, not the people here, everybody else, about 6 billion of them, is this: there will come a day when the things you don't want to think about because they're uncomfortable and they're unpopular and you'd rather just say, no, I'm just going to live my life and not make waves. Everybody's going to know them. Everybody is going to know them. And they're going to look back at today and look back at all the people who didn't want to hear it and who didn't want to think about it, who just, well, I'm going to vote. I vote, so I do my civic responsibility and I don't really want to hear anything else. And they're going to say, holy smokes, what a sad reflection on humanity that such a basic concept of don't aggress against your neighbor was accepted by this tiny percentage of the population, and everybody else thought it was perfectly fine. And in the future, whether it's your children or their children or however many generations down, if you're still alive when the truth becomes popular and your kids or their kids, your grandkids, whatever, comes to you and say, yeah, you lived through that time where they worshiped this mythical thing called government, right? Yeah. And what did you do about it? I voted. To all you people out there, do you think that that's going to make future generations happy about what you are doing and advocating right now? Do you think that going with the flow, look back at history to answer this question. Do you think that going with the flow absolves you of responsibility for what you believe, what you do, what you advocate today? Because it doesn't. If everyone around you advocates evil, the right thing to do is go against everyone around you. It's not to go with the flow. And there will come a time where everybody knows everybody knows that government is a lie. Right now, it's a very small percentage of people that know that. There will be a day when everybody knows that, and they will look back at the people who wouldn't accept it, who wouldn't think about it, but who went along with the game, it's called politics, as completely duped, ignorant. They will view them the way we would view a tribe that still throws people into a volcano to offer sacrifices to their god. That is as rational as the belief in government is. And the fact that right now there's only a few people in the tribe saying, maybe the volcano is just a geological thing and it isn't a god at all and we shouldn't be throwing people into it. It's a tiny percentage right now. Eventually it'll be everybody. And we look back at the tribes who did such things and caused pain and suffering and misery and think, oh, how unenlightened, how primitive, how pathetic. It's good we moved forward. Well, we still have a lot of moving forward to do, and we will do that moving forward one way or another. All the nastiness in between notwithstanding, we will get to the point where everybody realizes that worshiping a volcano god and worshiping government are the same thing. There is no such beast. We should stop throwing sacrifices to it. So, to everybody out there who doesn't want to think about these things because they're uncomfortable and you've not thought about them before and they're disturbing and you don't know how to picture the world without the volcano god, I mean government. Start thinking about it now, because there will come a day when what almost everyone believes now will seem completely insane, because it is completely insane. And let me be the first to admit, I had a belief system that was utterly irrational, self-contradictory, and insane for many, many years. And I never questioned it, and I never looked at it. And now, literally, I am ashamed that I ever advocated violence against innocent people. If you vote Democrat, if you vote Republican, moderate, if you vote at all, you are advocating violence against innocent people. And if you try not to think about that and try not to look at the possibility and go blah, 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 it doesn't change the fact that you're still advocating evil. And the future generations are going to look back at you and say, yeah, those were the sort of clueless people who were irresponsible and kept doing these dumb things. So, when your grandchildren come to you and you want to be able to say something more than, I voted, I dare you now to actually think about these things. Whether you read The Most Dangerous Superstition or watch one of Stefan's 8 billion podcasts, which are all awesome, every one of the 8 billion, start thinking about it now, because the future generations are not going to accept, well, everyone else was doing it, as an excuse. And to the few of you pushing in the right direction despite the inertia, I thank you very much, and keep going, because I guarantee in the end we win.